And good evening. Welcome to Top Story, Russia's mixed messages. We begin Top Story tonight with President Biden addressing the American people about the crisis in Ukraine as Russia claims it's starting a slight drawdown of troops at the border. The president urging diplomacy, but saying the U.S. will defend NATO territory with, quote, full force of American power and rally the world if Russia invades, something he says is still very possible. However, his remarks come as Russia released video appearing to show some of its troops retreating from the border with Ukraine, a claim the Kremlin has made before. And Putin sitting down with the Chancellor of Germany today saying he's open to more talks with the West. Coming up, what Germany said that could be influencing Putin tonight. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arriving in Brussels now, where he is meeting with NATO leaders as the world watches to see if Russia is actually stepping back from the brink of war. But tonight, a cyber attack crippling critical websites in Ukraine. So let's get right to NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, who's there and leads us off tonight.
Tonight, President Biden's bleak warning about the looming Russian threat on the Ukrainian border.
An invasion remains distinctly possible.
He laid out two paths, promising punishing sanctions if President Vladimir Putin invades, while saying the door to diplomacy is still open.
We should give the diplomacy every chance to succeed. And I believe there are real ways to address our respective security concerns.
It comes after a day of mixed messages from President Putin, who declared he, too, was ready for more talks, appearing with Germany's chancellor saying, "Do we want war or not? Of course not." And releasing footage of some Russian forces, including these tanks, being put on trains pulling back from the Ukrainian border. A claim President Biden says the U.S. has not yet verified. But then appearing to dash hopes of a quick breakthrough, President Putin said the U.S. and NATO continue to ignore Russia's security concerns about Ukraine possibly joining NATO. And he accused Ukraine of a, quote, genocide against pro-Russian separatists who live in an enclave in eastern Ukraine. Hours earlier, Russia's parliament called on Putin to recognize the separatists' independence.
Tom, amid all of this pressure, amid all of these warnings and the new ones today from President Biden, Ukrainians today were hit by a disruptive cyber attack. It took the Ministry of Defense's website offline. It locked up 2 banks. Services were eventually restored. The banks say no money was stolen, but it unsettled people profoundly that they were locked out of their finances, couldn't access their bank accounts for most of the day, 7-8 hours at least. And U.S. intelligence officials, Tom, have worried that cyber attacks could be a precursor to a military invasion.
No doubt it sent shock and confusion across the country. All right, Richard, thank you for that. I want to bring in NBC News military analyst General Barry McCaffrey. He's a retired 4-star general and former National Security Council member under President Clinton. General, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. Let's start with that cyber attack that Richard just mentioned there. How would this affect any type of military operation if this indeed was a first salvo?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to underscore the extremely effective speech by President Biden, heavy on deterrence, articulating the unity of NATO. He sent Secretary Austin over to both NATO headquarters in Brussels and then Poland and then the Baltic states. And he also spoke directly to the Russian people, which I thought was extremely effective. Look, Tom, we have a crisis that is not ending yet with the Ukraine. There's 150,000 troops assembled around the country. They're prepared to take the maritime ports in the south, to grab the 2 breakaway provinces for sure, and potentially to conduct a major invasion and seize the whole country. Putin's determined on this. It looks to me as if he's starting to blink. He's starting to recognize the strategic disaster that will ensue if he actually carries out this operation. So let's see what happens over the next week.
So, General, Putin says, as you mentioned, they're pulling back some troops. They released video that appears to show tanks being loaded onto rail transports. This is the video right here. As someone who has commanded forces and stared down enemies in the past, how do you interpret this video? Do you take Putin at his word? And how do you not know that this is just some type of trick before an invasion?
Well, of course, we can't believe anything Putin says. The Russians are masters of disinformation, of deception planning. We will be able, with overhead satellite photography, count the armor that are on site, whether they pull back or not. This is symbolic. So far, this giant military enterprise is still there in the field. Even though it's about to thaw in early March, and the ground will end up marshy, Putin could keep these troops there for another 90 days at least, adding military threats to what he hopes to achieve, which is to get essentially Ukraine back into Mother Russia and to get the U.S. out of Europe.
So, General, you started your comments highlighting President Biden's words tonight, but I actually want to talk about what Germany's chancellor said, because I think he actually made the biggest statement, the most important statement today. This is a quote. I want to put it up on the screen. He was talking about basically Ukraine will not be joining NATO, won't even be on the agenda for years to come. So he says, quote, everyone must take a step back a bit here and make it clear to themselves that we can't just have a possible military conflict over a question that is not on the agenda. A lot of people are honing in on the agenda, essentially telling Putin, right? Maybe signaling to Putin, listen, Ukraine, it's going to be a few years before we even start talking about this. Why would you invade even now? How effective do you think that comment would be to somebody like Vladimir Putin?
Well, it may give him a fig leaf to back out of the situation. Both the German chancellor and the French president have hinted at, by the way, any one of the 30 NATO countries can deny entry to any new applicant. And the Ukraine was never close to being offered a membership. There were preconditions that would have taken another decade to fulfill. But I think what they're essentially doing is giving Putin something he can use to say, I achieved my purpose. His real purpose, though, implacable, eventually he'll try it, is to get Ukraine back into Mother Russia. He's after Belarus, the Ukraine, and Georgia. So we'll see. This is a good move, I think, personally, by the German chancellor.
Okay, General Barry McCaffrey for us tonight on Top Story. General, we always appreciate your analysis. Okay, now to the other major headline tonight. Prince Andrew reaching a settlement in a sex abuse case filed by a woman who accused him of sexually assaulting her, saying she was trafficked to him by the late Jeffrey Epstein. NBC's senior international correspondent Keir Simmons has more.
Tonight, Prince Andrew dramatically averting a court battle, not admitting liability, but not clearing his name, declaring his regret for his relationship with the late Jeffrey Epstein, and commending the bravery of Virginia Giuffre and other survivors of sex trafficking. Virginia Giuffre claimed she was sexually assaulted by the prince when she was 17 years old, trafficked by Epstein.
It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family.
Prince Andrew now paying an undisclosed sum to a charity she chose, supporting victims' rights.
There is a very strong desire not to see the Queen's personal funds go towards a settlement of this nature, because that would be a really bad look.
For the prince tonight, the end of a damaging case stretching back 2 decades. Virginia Giuffre claims she was first assaulted by Prince Andrew in March 2001. In 2010, he's photographed with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein is released from prison. In 2019, he records an interview with the BBC, widely viewed as a disaster. In it, he says he does not remember being photographed with Giuffre in this picture.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
Then in January this year, he loses a battle to have a New York court throw out the case, and he is stripped of his royal patronages.
All right, Keir Simmons joins us now live here on Top Story from London. Keir, I'm curious, what are royal watchers saying? Do they think this had to do more with the deposition date coming up, or more to do with the Queen and her Jubilee celebration?
Well, it's a great question, Tom, because it goes to the heart of the question of whether this was a legal issue or whether this was a reputational issue for the royal family. Now, as you can imagine, tonight the British newspapers, we're beginning to see them, are really full of reporting and speculation about what really happened here. There are quotes talking about how quickly things changed. We thought Prince Andrew was ready to fight, was ready to go to court in New York. Suddenly, this huge change in his approach. There are reports that the Queen and Prince Charles are putting a lot of pressure on Prince Andrew, and a pretty sensational report, not confirmed by NBC News, Tom, that the Queen has put some of her private money. You heard that comment in my report there, one royal watcher saying that would be really damaging. Well, there is some reporting tonight, again, we haven't confirmed it, that the Queen's private money, some of that is being used towards this settlement. I think if that is the case, that will cause a lot of comment. If it is the case, though, it underscores just how much the Queen did not want to see this play out during her Jubilee year.
Yeah, and if that is true, it could speak to how big this settlement was as well. Keir, before you go, one more quick question. What does this mean for Prince Andrew's royal status?
I think Prince Andrew can't come back from this, honestly, Tom. He's had his official royal title, His Royal Highness, taken away, his patronages. There is a small sentence at the end of that statement where he talks about hoping to work with sex abuse charities, trafficking charities in the future. Maybe that's a glimmer that he thinks there's a way back for him, but of course he'd have to find charities that were prepared to work with him. His royal status really has been ruined by this. I think it's really difficult to see a way back for him.
Keir Simmons, some great reporting tonight. We thank you for joining Top Story. For more legal analysis on this settlement, attorney Angela Senadella joins us now on set live here on Top Story. So, Angela, you know, first off, when you heard about the settlement, you heard the statement. What was your first thought?
So my first thought is what's missing here? And what's missing is any admission of wrongdoing, any accountability. The reason why this is relevant is because Virginia and her team, from the moment this lawsuit was filed, insisted they would never settle unless there was some sort of accountability. The closest he comes to this in this statement is that he associated with Epstein. That to me is no accountability. So that surprised me.
So two things happened, right? He settled, but he also says he's going to make a donation to these charities. What does that tell you?
So to me, that's a difference. That's a U-turn from what he said before. So either that means that the amount that he is giving is interesting. It's either so big that Virginia is willing to change her standpoint, or it's that something in the case changed.
Is this the end of Prince Andrew's legal troubles when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein? Could he ever be compelled to testify in other cases about Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yes, so this is the only civil lawsuit that's out against him right now. But I think it's important to remember that she is not the only person who has accused him. So when anyone in a civil lawsuit like this settles, other people can start to come forward. So I'm not saying there necessarily are other accusers, but if there are, this would be the time to come forward because he has settled.
And as far as Virginia Giuffre is concerned, is this sort of the end of her lawsuits? Is this the end of it?
Yes, this appears to be the final end of Virginia.
Top Story legal analyst Angela Senadella for us tonight. Angela, we thank you for that. We want to turn now to weather because we're tracking a storm system sweeping across the country, expected to bring heavy rain and severe thunderstorms as it moves east. 10 million Americans now on alert across the southern plains. So I want to bring in WNBC weather anchor Dave Price, who's in timing it out for us tonight. So Dave, what do we have to be worried about here?
Well, this is where it begins. It's really going to power up as we head through the next 24 hours. Let's walk on over to the wall, Tom, and take a look all the way from the southwest toward the northeast. We're talking about high winds for sections of California, Nevada, into Arizona and New Mexico, upwards of 55 miles per hour. Windy through sections of the Plain States, in through the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and flooding rains, heavy rains on top of snowpack, and all this begins to advance to the east. As I mentioned, really beginning to ramp up in the next 24 hours, but keep in mind we're already seeing some light snow over sections of the Rockies and out to the west. So here's how we time it out. Tomorrow, a cold rain, and a heavy rain at that, forms right along this advancing front, and we're looking where the air is warmer at the possibility of some severe weather in the southern plains. That moves towards the east. Thursday, we're talking about that rain rain changing over to ice and snow. It does not take a lot of either to mess up travel and to create slick and potentially treacherous conditions in this section of the country. And then as we head into Kentucky, Louisiana, into the southern plains, Tennessee Valley, and the Gulf states, that's where we could be talking about more severe weather. As we head into Friday, all of it begins to advance into the northeast. Heavy rains and wind for sections of the I-95 corridor and snow through New England. So the rainfall forecast, look at this. This is 2 to 3 inches of rain on top of the snowpack. That's what's going to create our flooding concerns in sections of the Midwest. Now, as far as the snow and ice, look at that. Ranging from Chicago over to Kansas City, air travel is going to be impacted. Slick roadways, slick sidewalks, and dangerous conditions. It does not take a lot of ice to create that circumstance. And snowfall in some areas of the country, we could be looking at upwards of half a foot of snow or more in through Kansas City, back into the Rockies, and stretching through sections of the Midwest. Now, let's talk about that threat of severe weather right now. As we head into Wednesday night, Tulsa, over to Dallas, Wichita Falls, wind gusts above 60 miles per hour, could see some hail, and the possibility of tornadoes. All of that continues to advance to the east as we head into Thursday. Tupelo, Memphis, Jackson, Baton Rouge, over to Shreveport. We'll watch it all, even stretching to some extent into sections of Georgia. Again, the same risk as we talked about earlier. So rough weather rolls all the way from the southwest into northern New England over the next several days. Tom?
All right, Dave, we'll stay on top of the storm throughout the week. We thank you. We're also following another breaking story tonight. A 6-year-old girl found alive, hidden below a staircase in a New York home. She'd been missing for more than 2 years. Authorities finding her last night after receiving a tip. Here's Jesse Kirsch with more.
Tonight, Paisley Schultz is alive and safe in upstate New York, remarkably healthy. Saugerties, New York police say they discovered the 6-year-old inside this home, hidden beneath the stairs with one of her captors, the girl's own mother.
Blankets were soaking wet, extremely heavy to lift up, so they had been there for a while.
The little girl missing since summer 2019. Police suspected she'd been kidnapped by her parents. The chief also says they'd lost custody just before Paisley's disappearance. Police say the investigation repeatedly brought officers to this very home, adding that authorities were welcomed inside to look over limited areas at times before a fresh tip yesterday led to a search warrant and a detective seeing what looked like a blanket under the floorboards of the stairs.
It was a feeling that he had. It was just the way the steps felt when he walked on them. It was something, and what he saw, it didn't seem right to him.
Police say Paisley's mom, dad, and grandfather have been charged in connection with her abduction. Some neighbors reacting to the news.
My granddaughter's been in the house several times for parties and stuff, and I'm just shocked because they always seem friendly and nice.
All right, Jesse joins us now live from Saugerties, New York. Jesse, when you see that place where she was put under the staircase, it's so horrific that a little girl had to be under there. They suspected this home for a while, police did. Why did it take them so long to find this little girl?
Yeah, Tom, it sounds like that search warrant made all the difference. Police had been here repeatedly. They tell us about half a dozen times over the last 2 years or so. In fact, police say they were welcomed into the home on a few occasions, but they were only allowed in those times to see limited areas in the house. Police say once they got that search warrant, they made their way to an area that had not been explored previously, and that's when the detective found that key discovery, saw the floorboards that just didn't look right, according to police. Tonight, authorities tell us that Paisley has been reunited with her legal guardian as well as her older sister. Police also say mom, dad, and the grandfather have been ordered by a court to stay away from the 6-year-old girl.
So, Jesse, this is a little confusing to people because you have the biological parents who are accused here and the legal parents. Do we know what the motive was with the biological parents? Was it just to keep their own daughter? The court had denied them?
Police have been keeping a lot of details, of course, close to the vest because this is an ongoing investigation. They wouldn't even give me more details on what the tip was that led to the search warrant being approved by the court. And police also said because this has to deal with child custody, some of the court records from back in 2019 are under seal, Tom. So at this point, there aren't that many details about exactly what happened, but the police chief did make a point of stressing to us that there were no signs of abuse or assault and that the girl did appear to have been well fed, Tom.
Okay, that's good to know. Jesse, we thank you for that reporting on this developing story tonight. We now move to a dramatic scene unfolding in Honduras. The former president, arrested late today on the front steps of his home, led away in handcuffs and a bulletproof vest, just 3 weeks after leaving office. The arrest coming at the request of U.S. officials who have demanded his extradition to face drug trafficking charges in the States. NBC's Priscilla Thompson has the late details.
Tonight, Honduras National Police arresting their former president at his home after the U.S. requested his extradition to the States to face drug trafficking and weapons charges. Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was unseated last month after serving as president for 8 years, facing accusations that he took part in a violent drug trafficking conspiracy, responsible for moving more than 500,000 kilos of cocaine since 2004. His arrest coming after a tense standoff with police, officers blocking the roads to his home and helicopters monitoring his movements from the sky. Hernandez signaling his intention to cooperate in an audio message posted to Twitter. I am set to cooperate and voluntarily arrive with their escort, he says, so I can face this situation and defend myself. It's a dramatic end to a slow fall from grace for a man once considered a key U.S. ally in the region. Rumors of an impending arrest intensifying after his brother's conviction last year. The former Honduran Congressman Juan Antonio Hernandez was arrested and tried in the U.S., found guilty of smuggling more than 185 kilos of cocaine into the country, and sentenced to life in prison last March. His older brother was named as co-conspirator in that case, prosecutors alleging he used his presidential influence to provide state-sponsored resources and security to drug traffickers.
En nombre del pueblo hondureño.
Hernandez has long denied his involvement in any illegal activity, in 2019 saying, "In the name of the Honduran people, I reiterate my complete rejection of the accusation that our country is a drug-stealing state." But with an extradition apparently imminent, Hernandez now preparing to defend himself in what could be one of the highest profile criminal cases for a former world leader in decades. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News.
Back here at home to a major headline, a $73 million settlement is being announced in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings. 26 killed in Newtown, Connecticut that day, 20 of them children. The families of the victims claiming Remington, the manufacturer of the gun used in the massacre, illegally marketed their firearms to civilians. Why those families say despite this victory, justice will never be done. Here's Kate Snow.
Today is a day of accountability.
For the families of 5 children and 4 adults lost at Sandy Hook Elementary, a victory born out of grief.
True justice would be our 15-year-old, healthy and standing next to us right now. But Benny will never be 15. He will be 6 forever.
A $73 million settlement with Remington, maker of the gun used to kill 26 people in Newtown.
We hope that our lawsuit sends a message to the gun industry.
Through court after court for more than 7 years, the families argued Remington violated a Connecticut law by marketing an AR-15 style rifle to civilians. It was a path around federal laws that protect gun manufacturers from liability, which some legal experts say could now be a roadmap for future cases. In discovery, Remington sent thousands of internal documents, including campaigns geared toward young men, equating gun ownership with your man card.
They were aggressively marketing to young men who were potentially violence prone.
Mark Barden and his wife Jackie lost their son Daniel.
People need to know how irresponsible the gun industry is about marketing these weapons. So that was our goal, was for it to be known.
Do you think you've achieved that?
Yes, I do.
Remington did not respond to our request for comment. The families refused to settle until they won the right to release the documents publicly.
Was that key for you?
Yes, absolutely. That was critical. This has never been about money.
4 insurance companies will pay the $73 million. Nicole Hockley, who lost her son Dylan, hopes this puts them on notice too.
I worked in insurance for a number of years doing marketing for them, and this will absolutely make them change their practices.
Change these families hope will save lives.
All right, Kate Snow joins us now live. Kate, the big question after watching this story and reading this headline, it has to be, will this lead to more lawsuits against gun manufacturers?
Well, that's certainly what these families hope, that this sort of paves the way for others. We spoke to some legal experts. They all say it may not open the floodgates, Tom, but it may actually provide sort of a roadmap, a way to ask the right questions and pursue the right state laws to kind of get around that federal immunity that the gun industry has been granted. And I want to note President Biden, the White House just put out a statement, and in it, the president says that until the federal laws are changed, in the meantime, I will continue to urge state and local lawmakers, lawyers, and survivors of gun violence to pursue efforts to replicate what the Sandy Hook survivors have done here. Tom.
All right, Kate Snow with that new reporting just in also on this major headline. Kate, thank you. Moving on now to Los Angeles and another legal case. Tonight, the family of Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer killed on the set of the movie Rust, filing a wrongful death lawsuit blaming Alec Baldwin and other members of the production team for her death. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has these late details.
Today, the family of Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer shot and killed on the set of Rust, blamed Alec Baldwin, who fired the gun, and several others for her death, saying his reckless actions should have been prevented.
Why is Alec Baldwin responsible for what happened?
He was holding the weapon that shot and killed another human being. There was no need for him to shoot the weapon.
The wrongful death lawsuit blasting Baldwin, the production company, the film's armorer, and assistant director for disregarding at least 15 standard safety practices. The attorneys creating this startling animation, which they say shows how the shot was fired from 4 feet away. The lawsuit alleges the armorer was inexperienced and unqualified, while the production utilized aggressive, cost-cutting practices that endangered cast and crew. Baldwin's attorneys deny claims he was reckless, saying again today he was told by the crew the gun was safe.
I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it.
The actor has said he was following Hutchins' direction.
Alec thinks he's the victim. He's blaming Helena. Helena did nothing to cause this, and it's really despicable that he would come out and blame the victim.
Tonight, with 4 civil lawsuits now filed, the criminal investigation remains underway. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
All right, we're back now with a terrifying moment for a mayoral candidate in Louisville, Kentucky. A gunman walked into his campaign office on Monday and opened fire. That candidate now telling reporters just how close he came to injury, maybe even death. Sinclair Esamoah has this report.
Tonight, a campaign office, now a crime scene.
There are gunshots up here. There are gun bullet holes.
After a gunman allegedly opened fire on mayoral candidate Craig Greenberg Monday in Louisville, Kentucky.
A man walked into our office. When we greeted him, he pulled out a gun, aimed directly at me, and began shooting.
Greenberg says a member of his team shot and barricaded the door after the gunman fired 5 rounds. One shot just narrowly missing the Democratic candidate.
Despite one bullet coming so close that it grazed my sweater and my shirt, no one was physically harmed, and we're extraordinarily grateful for our safety.
Police say Greenberg was likely the intended target.
It does appear, however, that one individual in particular was targeted, and that is one of our mayoral candidates, Craig Greenberg.
Local elected leaders shocked by the apparent targeting of a political candidate.
Democracy is based upon, the people having the right to vote, and to think that someone would try to kill a political candidate is just really unthinkable here in our city.
Police arrested 21-year-old Quintez Brown, found with a loaded 9mm Glock handgun less than half a mile away from the campaign office. Prosecutors charged Brown with attempted murder and 4 counts of wanton endangerment. Brown, an activist and college student, previously participated in the 2018 March for Our Lives rally, a movement to curb gun violence. He had this to say on MSNBC.
I love how the emphasis is, it's like this isn't a school safety issue, this is a school safety issue, this is a gun violence issue, because gun violence does not affect schools, but communities, churches, clubs, everywhere. So at school, and it's very hard to feel safe now because it's like a war zone.
Brown appeared in court earlier Tuesday and pleaded not guilty. He currently is being held on a $100,000 bond. During the hearing, his lawyer asked the court to take into account Brown's mental state.
I believe that there's serious mental issues at play here, and I'm going to have him evaluated immediately.
Candidate Greenberg, who campaigned on a platform to, quote, stop the violence before this incident, now says there's more work to be done.
It's not lost on me that the violence my staff and I experience today is far too common in our city. Too many Louisville families have experienced the trauma of gun violence. Too many in Louisville were not as blessed as my team and I were today to survive.
All right, Zinclay joins us now. Zinclay, so Brown, the suspect, we heard him, he was interviewed during that march there. Do we know anything about the motive here?
Yeah, Tom. So when it comes to the motive, authorities still have not released that information. We do know that the ATF and FBI are investigating, but I did receive a statement from Brown's attorney just minutes ago. He tells us that his client is, quote, dealing with severe mental illness and said his client needs not imprisonment, but treatment. Tom?
All right, Zinclay, we thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, that deadly plane crash off the coast of North Carolina. We told you about it last night. The plane going down with 4 high school students and 4 other adults. The discovery just made by dive teams. Also, the alarming new report on a New Jersey nursing home where bodies were found stacked in a morgue at the height of the pandemic. NBC's Emily Aketa joins Top Story tonight with the growing calls to shut down the facility and why the federal government might get involved. A lot of new reporting on this one. Stay with us. All right, now to Top Story's newsfeed, and we begin with an update on that deadly plane crash off the coast of North Carolina. Officials say dive teams have found the plane's fuselage in 55 feet of water, and more remains were discovered. Crews are now working to recover the bodies and the aircraft's data recorder. The small plane crashed on Sunday about 3 miles from the shore while carrying 4 high school sophomores and 4 other adults who were returning from a duck hunting trip. All right, former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin has lost her libel lawsuit against the New York Times. A jury today rejecting her claim that the newspaper maliciously damaged her reputation when it incorrectly linked her to a mass shooting in 2011 that nearly killed former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. The verdict comes one day after the judge said he would dismiss the case. Palin is vowing to appeal. All right, 2 major upcoming music festivals have dropped all COVID restrictions. Both Coachella and Stagecoach will not require vaccinations, negative tests, or even masks when they take place in the California desert in April. And starting Thursday, Disney is dropping its indoor mask mandate for vaccinated guests at its parks in California and Florida. Masks are optional for all guests outside. And Virgin Galactic will begin selling tickets to space to the general public. The space tourism company founded by Richard Branson says starting tomorrow, people can reserve their spot for a 90-minute flight to the edge of space. The price? $450,000. Passengers will reach an altitude of more than 50 miles up, which is the FAA boundary for outer space, and experience weightlessness for about 4 minutes before returning to Earth. The trip's expected to begin later this year. All right, now to an NBC News investigation into a troubling discovery at a New Jersey nursing home. Bodies of deceased residents found stacked on top of one another during the height of the pandemic. A new state report revealing more alarming allegations of mistreatment. NBC's Emily Aketa reports.
The New Jersey nursing home where 17 bodies were found stacked in a tiny morgue in more hot water. The state's Department of Health has halted new admissions at recently renamed Woodland Behavioral Health. State officials writing the facility failed to appropriately prevent abuse and neglect, describing in a 17-page report how staff members allegedly failed to perform CPR or call 911 for 2 unresponsive patients, nor did they provide life-saving medicine to some residents with COVID as directed by a doctor. Another individual was left soiled in feces for 10 hours. Authorities say COVID infected more than 230 residents and staff at the facility in just 10 days at the end of last year. 91 residents there have died from the virus since the start of the pandemic.
It was like the worst scenario. He died alone. I know he wasn't taken care of.
Sharon Farrell's brother among those lost.
There's no reason on this earth that people live the way they are living in that facility. Who's overseeing this? Where was the state?
The state is now reviewing Woodland Behavioral's response to inspectors' concerns. The owners declined to comment for this story, but previously told NBC News the COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges, and our heroic staff faced those challenges as best as they could. Harvard professor David Grabowski helps identify best practices for nursing homes nationwide during the pandemic.
These nursing homes that are perpetually among the worst performers, they don't improve without some sort of outside activity.
Emily joins us now in studio. Emily, you know, it's just so sad what happened to all these people in that nursing home. So my question is, are there any criminal charges? Has that even been mentioned? And you were telling me earlier the federal government has already looked at this nursing home before?
Yeah, that's right. So no word on the criminal charges yet. But earlier this pandemic, the owners of this facility were fined more than $220,000 because it was not in substantial compliance with federal regulations. Tonight, the federal government says that, you know, this facility has made some improvements over the last several weeks and is coming closer to being within compliance. But if it does not continue down that path, they could go without federal funding, Tom.
All right, Emily Aketa on that investigation tonight. Emily, thank you. Time for Top Stories Global Watch and the investigation after a deadly train crash in Germany. Authorities say two commuter trains collided head-on near Munich, with one derailing off the tracks. At least one person killed so far, more than a dozen injured. Investigators now looking into why both trains were operating on the same track. And work has begun to widen the Suez Canal after a traffic jam there halted global shipping last year. You may remember this. Crews are working to make an additional 10 kilometers, about 6 miles, accessible to two-way traffic. The project was accelerated after a container ship, there it is, became stuck in the canal last March. It's expected to cost nearly $200 million and be completed by June 2023. Transit time to pass through the canal will still be about 11 hours. All right, coming up, prices soaring. I don't know if you've tried to buy a car lately. Sticker shock for anyone buying new or even used cars. What's driving up the cost? And what potential buyers need to know before even heading out to the dealership. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. We have Money Talks now. What consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. As the country continues to grapple with record-breaking inflation, price gouging has cropped up across a number of industries, creating newer obstacles for consumers as companies look to take advantage of a volatile market. NBC's Carrie Sanders takes us to Miami to show us what people in the hunt for a new or used car are now facing.
The cost of buying a car has been accelerating big time. These days, 8 out of 10 new car buyers pay more than sticker price. On average, $728 more. And in some cases, people are shelling out thousands more. Experts blame ongoing supply chain problems. Still, there are a lot of buyers in the market for a new ride. Justin Sofer had his eye on a new Toyota RAV4. He signed a contract and even put down a deposit for the manufacturer's suggested retail price. But when it arrived from Japan, serious sticker shock. The dealer jacked the price up by $2,000.
I've probably owned about 5 or 6 cars, and I've never paid sticker price.
Sofer eventually got his Toyota at sticker, but he tells me he had to find a new dealer.
You complained to the Massachusetts State Attorney General, and what kind of result did you get?
They said that they would keep a record of it, but there wasn't anything they could do in my particular case, unfortunately.
But car manufacturers are not happy with price gouging. GM reportedly telling its dealers that it will be forced to take action if it learns of any unethical sales practices. Ford says, quote, "We are actively looking at how to address those behaviors," even warning dealers who sell vehicles above MSRP they may not get the highly anticipated electric F-150 Lightning.
I've never seen anything like this in 25 years that I've been in the industry.
Arnaldo Baumann sold more than 25,000 Chevrolets last year, more than any Chevy dealer in the nation. Except for Corvettes, he says he prices all vehicles at least $2,000 below MSRP. Not bad for a guy who came to the U.S. from Cuba in 1994 and began by selling fish on the side of the road.
I've always tried to go in the opposite direction than the rest. If you're gonna charge 10,000 over MSRP, you're going to charge 2,000, 3,000 under MSRP.
Baumann says he makes less money per sale, but wins in volume. Even more confusing, the used car market. Prices up a staggering 40.5% in the past year. A significant number of used cars bought in 2021 now actually selling for more than when they were new.
1 in 10 customers got more money for a trade-in than with the initial purchase price. And that is remarkable.
Nice profit, but where do you go from there? All right, Carrie, thank you. Coming up, the heartwarming story of a boy who lost his most cherished toy and the massive effort airport workers made to reunite this inseparable pair. Stay with us. And finally tonight, a toy story. A little boy from Dallas lost his teddy bear after leaving it at the Milwaukee International Airport. And then the airport staff went on a mission to reunite them. Many children have had that one toy they really loved. For Ezekiel Burnett, a 5-year-old boy from Dallas, it's Teddy, his stuffed bear. He's had Teddy his entire life, given to him when he was born, and the two have been inseparable. But recently, after taking a flight out of Milwaukee's Mitchell International Airport over the holidays, Teddy disappeared.
We had a lost item show up in our lost and found, and it's a teddy bear. And what we've been doing recently is we're posting those online to try to reconnect those items with the owner who lost them.
TikToks, tweets, and Facebook posts went out, and the world responded.
We actually reached about 1.9 million people on Facebook, 1.8 million on TikTok, and over 400,000 on Twitter, with so many people who wanted to see this bear reunited.
The Milwaukee airport went viral, becoming the most watched airport on TikTok. And just like that, thousands of shares online led to a chance encounter.
Her hands were shaking, and she just like showed me the phone, and I looked at it, and at first it didn't really compute. I looked at it, and I'm like, wow, that's Ezekiel's teddy bear.
Southwest Airlines contacted the Burnett family, offering to fly them out from Dallas to Milwaukee and reunite the two lifelong friends.
The days leading up to this, he's been talking about it every single day. We wake up and he's like, are we going to Wisconsin today?
During the press conference and in front of the cameras, the long-awaited reunion finally happened. A shy Ezekiel kept calm, only needing 2 words to describe his feelings.
So happy.
Back home in Dallas, Ezekiel is not taking any chances, keeping Teddy close by.
There it is. Oh, that's a big hug.
We are so happy Ezekiel and Teddy are back together. Thanks so much for watching Top Story tonight. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Have a great night. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.